Welcome back, everyone, to the Winning Play Podcast. Alongside my co-hosts, Robb Hue and Drew James, I am Kendall Capps. Guys, we're coming out of Wild Card Weekend, and it was pretty wild. I mean, we had a few obvious clunkers, and you generally will see that in Wild Card Weekend. But we also had a handful of upsets in games that were close, in Vegas, and nevertheless, the dog pulled it off. And I kind of want to kick it off with one of those. And in the AFC, the Houston Texans on Saturday, the first game of the weekend, they're hosting the Chargers, but with 3-point dogs. And for the first half, the Chargers looked like they were in control of that game. And as it progressed, it just got worse and worse and worse to the point where, they should have just been thrown in a white towel. That might have been one of the worst postseason performances from a quarterback in Justin Herbert that I've seen. I'm curious, Drew, what are your thoughts?
I'm mad at myself for not picking the Texans when I knew I should last week, and we talked about that. I don't know that it felt like this game was in hand, but I'll tell you the play that changed it was the C.J. Stroud fumble, finds a way to pick it up, make a play, get the first down, and they get points out of it, and Houston's able to go into the half with the lead. That changed everything. And it was very clear that C.J. Stroud is the kind of guy that makes those plays when it counts, and it doesn't look like Justin Herbert is. Lots of plays he could have made that could have kept them in this game, and he missed over and over again. Quentin Johnson didn't help him again. Talk about worst performances I've seen. He's up there too. It was just a mess all around. I know, Rob, you always talk about Harbaugh in his second year takes teams to the title game. This is his first year, so I might be able to have hope for the Chargers still next year, but Herbert's performance definitely stands out, and you have to start thinking about, is he on the level that people have talked about him as for his whole career?
Yeah, Herbert's on notice. He needs to buck up and show up. But this Chargers team overall, they're missing significant piece on the offensive side. Before Herbert completely collapsed, which he did, they had 7 drops from receivers. He's got nobody except for Ladd McConkey out there, really. I know you like Josh Palmer, Kendall, but he's a pretty middling receiver in my opinion.
And he ended up playing, I don't even know if he was on the field.
I don't think he played.
He was banged up coming in. Yeah, I don't even think he even suited up for that game.
And again, he's not a guy that you hope to make a run with, really. Maybe a wide receiver 3. But that Chargers team, they got hammered. And, Drew, you talked about the C.J. Stroud fumble. The fumble-Ruski improv play is probably the hardest play for defenses to ever cover. Everything gets shaken. The timing gets all rocked. You don't know whether to come up for the ball, and lots of talented QBs make that work. We've seen Lamar make it work and have a spectacular play. It's really hard on a defense when the timing gets disrupted like that. Even Ben Johnson and the Lions took advantage of that very fact and did the fake fumble and scored a touchdown off of that. So yeah, that was a surprise.
Part of the reason why, and I touched on it last week, I took Houston, even though I thought the Chargers might win the game, but, getting 3 points at home with as I said on the show last week, who I believe to be the better quarterback, a better running back, a better wide receiver 1, and the best defensive player in the game. And when you have all 4 of those and you're at home getting points, that's why I went that way. And it pretty much played out. Nico Collins did pretty much whatever he wanted. And don't get me wrong, Derwin James had one hell of a game at safety and made play after play, and they did everything they could to try to keep their team in the game. But when you got your quarterback throwing pick sixes left and right in the second half and missing open receivers, I have been a massive Justin Herbert defender for a number of years, and Drew and I have had arguments for days about this guy. And I texted during that game, and I said, that's it. I can't continue to defend when in all the biggest moments and all of the biggest games of his career, he comes up small. And once again, C.J. Stroud, in one of the biggest games of his career, really stepped up, especially as that game progressed. So that was interesting to see. And, now they got an even bigger fight on their hands coming up, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. I want to transition to what, some people thought was going to be a slobber knocker. The next game on Saturday, it was interesting this year. The NFL had all AFC slate first, then all NFC slate, which I don't know if they had ever really done that in Wild Card Weekend before. But nevertheless, Saturday night, we got what normally would be this physical, bruising game between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. Didn't so much turn out to be that way. It was more.
Oh, I think it was bruising for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, Russ, they did what they could. They hit a couple big shots to try to give themselves a chance in the second half. But realistically, they were never in this game. And Derrick Henry, once again, proving this guy is an absolute machine. Like, it's just unreal what he continues to do.
Yeah, I mean, this team looks like it's almost impossible to stop. I think we all thought the Ravens would win this game. They won it pretty easily. They kind of shut it down in the fourth quarter, and we're just like, we can run it 10 yards at a time and take this game out of contention. But it's setting up what we all know is the real matchup this week of Ravens-Bills. So I think the Ravens handled business. I think if you're Pittsburgh, this was kind of best case scenario for this season. I know a lot of people were upset, but remember at the start of this season, if you had said, hey, we will go to the playoffs, that would have been a win. But they have a lot of players going in free agency, so they got to kind of figure out what the identity of that team is moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the writing was on the wall. The Steelers' offense, they showed, over numerous weeks to end the season that they just didn't have it. They were dysfunctional. They're not very powerful. I don't think this game was all that much of a surprise. I mean, I believe the Ravens jumped up 21-0, right, at some point.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. Yep.
It was just it was never a game. And Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, it's got to be one of the most dangerous QB running back duos of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much more firepower from a backfield you could ever have. So they're going to be a tough team for everybody moving forward, and that includes the Chiefs looking for a three-peat.
Well, and I think this game prompts a brief discussion on Mike Tomlin's tenure, because one thing that really isn't being talked about much coming out of that game, and it seemed pretty apparent to me, that Pittsburgh Steelers defense, which was known for being physical, ball hawking, getting guys to the ball, playing hard at least every snap. And very early in that game, there were several plays where they almost looked like, I forget which Ravens receiver, he caught a ball out in the flat, had 6 yards to go for first, and he was pushing forward, and he was getting closer to the first down line. The safety, who was standing at the line to gain, instead of running forward and pushing him back, stood there and waited for the bodies to come to him and kind of pushed him backwards. There was no life. There was no effort from the defense. That's not something I'm accustomed. We aren't surprised that the Steelers offense became who we thought they were, right? We all said that as the season progressed. But the fact that their defense was lackluster and lifeless was the surprise to me. And Tomlin, at this point, I mean, Pittsburgh Steelers, that organization has high bar, right? They've won 6 Super Bowls. They almost had their stairway to 7 and lost that game. That's their goal, is to win a championship. And I'm sorry, but losing in the first round of the playoffs year in and year out, that's just not cutting it,
Yeah, and the one thing Tomlin's always had is the locker room. He has guys that play hard for him. He's always been a master manager of,
they did in this game.
Of tough egos and stuff. But it just seems like, I don't want to say he's lost the locker room. I wouldn't go that far, but this does seem
I wouldn't either.
Well, but it does seem like he's lost it more than in years past, in the sense of that I don't know how great that team camaraderie is. You got George Pickens, who I'm just not a fan of.
Sounds like they're about to trade George Pickens.
Well, I mean, he's just a problem. He's more complaining than he is production, and
but then you got to look at the culture there. How many receivers have they had in a row that end up being a problem and they have to get rid of? It's every
they're willing.
One
they're willing to take on
backs.
Since Hines Ward. Hines Ward was like the consummate professional, but since Hines, it's just been a roller coaster. And they've
always been willing
to
take character concerns later in drafts so that they're able to get talent later. I mean, they're one of those teams that thinks they can manage it in the building. They take these guys that are talented and have red flags. That's why they drop. But I mean, the problem is they're stuck in this purgatory with Tomlin, where the team's good enough to make it to the playoffs, and they have a lower draft pick, which you're never going to get a quarterback. They haven't had a quarterback since Ben Roethlisberger. So, I mean, it's like, it is a tough cycle. And sometimes
Rob, I think
to
to your point there, I think Mike Tomlin being such a good coach is part of the problem. Is he's taking these teams that do not have talent. Their running backs look slow. They've got one decent wide receiver, and he plays half the games. On defense, your big star, TJ Watt, has been obviously injured. It's been 193 straight snaps since he's recorded a stat of any kind.
Wow. I didn't hear
that. Yeah, I saw he didn't record a stat all game
not
last
doing
week.
anything, and I think dragging a leg around. And I think the rest of the team sees that. No, like you said, Rob, there's no team camaraderie there. It seems like they have pieces to build from, but the quarterback position, the whole offense has to be figured out. And then you also got to add some pieces on the back end of the defense.
Yeah. So there's certainly a lot to be figured out in Pittsburgh if they actually want to turn this thing around. All right, so let's finish up the AFC. Sunday morning, the Buffalo Bills open up. They were big favorites against the Denver Broncos. And nevertheless, the game starts. Denver moves the ball, then hits a bomb for a score. It looks like this is going to be game on. And you could even make the argument that they were still in the game until that one unbelievable play from Buffalo on that 4th and I don't remember the yards needed. It might have been 4th and 3, 4th and 6. And they completed that 24-yard touchdown in the back of the end zone.
To Ty Johnson,
to Ty Johnson. That was an unbelievable play. Probably a little bit of luck that his shin didn't actually touch down out of bounds. I can't imagine he had that much presence of mind, but maybe he did. Nevertheless, it was one hell of a play. That put him up 13, and they felt comfortable from there. But I'm curious, did you guys give, as that game progressed, and knowing what Denver's defense had been, did you think they were, live dogs, or was it just a matter of time?
This game was pretty early for us on Sunday here, Pacific time. So I woke up at halftime. And
so then you...
I was still very confident that the Bills would win. It seemed I was never in doubt.
Not to rehash things that have already been said, but I just want to go back to what I talked about when we were discussing that game, which is two things. One, we're talking about a rookie QB on the road in the cold in Buffalo. And then two, the other thing was when you talk about the Broncos defense, it runs through that shutdown corner, Pat Surtain. And I kind of talked about it, how the best matchup for a team that runs through a shutdown corner like that is that the offense they're going against requires an alpha wide receiver one, that when you take that player away, it really hampers the offense and what they want to do. But the Bills don't do that because Josh spreads the ball around. They don't have like this alpha wide receiver one. They're making Ty Johnson get 30-yard touchdowns, Curtis Samuel get 50-yard touchdowns or whatever it is. So, the Broncos, it just, they were just outmatched, I think it's pretty clear, like it has been for this past several years, the best teams in the AFC are the Ravens, the Bills, and the Chiefs. So, the future is bright for the Broncos, though.
One heck of a finish. Yeah, I agree. I think Bo Nix at this point, you could say he's their franchise guy. He's revived Cortland Sutton's career. They still need,
they need a
running back. Absolutely.
They really didn't have any business being in the playoffs. And we all knew. The Bengals were a better team.
I disagree. I think that...
Or put it this way, they should be happy to have they reached their ceiling at making the play.
But I think they were a better team than Cincinnati. Cincinnati's defense was almost historically bad. But I'd probably part of your team.
If they were playing against each other in the playoffs, I'd probably take Cincinnati.
Because
that
of Joe
being
Burrow,
said,
likely,
we knew they weren't going to do anything to the Bills, and it was sweet when they scored and made a little effort, but the Bills and the Ravens was coming, and we all knew it was coming.
Yeah. And it's when we get to that, that's going to be a lot of fun. All right, let's move over to the NFC. Sunday afternoon, the Eagles hosting Green Bay Packers. I felt like we all kind of knew that the Packers, especially they were playing without Watson, and then they lose two of their other three receivers during the game. And Jordan Love, he didn't play well anyway. I'm curious, how much faith did you have or do you have in Philly coming out of a 12-point win, but there obviously seem to be some issues in Philadelphia? Drew, what do you think?
Well, I think this defense is the best defense in football. And that gives them a shot to win any game. If they're going to give up 10 points, they can do it. And Saquon Barkley really looks like the best player in the NFL this season. He won't win MVP because of how that award works, but he has had the biggest impact. This is going to be a year on his Hall of Fame resume. The offensive line looks amazing. I don't know if you saw just the shots of what they were doing to the Packers defensive line was embarrassing. That being said, you have to worry about the chemistry. Wide receivers don't look happy. Quarterback's not playing great. That offense does enough. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they made a run to the conference title game here. They've only got one more win to it, I guess. But I don't know. I do think the Rams might have something to say about that, but we'll get to that in a bit.
Well, don't forget the Packers defense is a very good defense. They really turn it on the last 6 to 8 weeks of the season. Their rookie linebacker is going to be a stud. I'm blanking on his name, but he really stepped it up, and their run defense really stepped up. So, I mean, the Eagles' offensive dysfunction, I hate to say it because I like Jalen Hurts, but I feel like if you put any top 12 quarterback on that team would just be far and away the best team in the NFL. It's just that offense with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I just don't really love Jalen Hurts as a passer, and I think his ceiling was reached several years ago, and he's just never kind of broken through. It's tough. They don't have the most exciting offensive scheme either, and it's when Saquon's not making amazing plays, it can look a little stodgy. But that being said, I mean the Eagles, they have the best defense in football. They got one of the best O-lines. They got right now the highest performing running back. They got 2 fantastic wide receivers. I mean, against a tough Packers defense, I'm not going to be concerned at all. For me, it's still all systems go in the Eagles. They're one of the 4 best teams in football remaining in the playoffs.
Personally, I think there's something to be read from A.J. Brown sitting down, reading a book, not paying attention to what's going on in the game because he set a career low targets, yards, catches. Clearly, he's frustrated.
Did anybody else read the book or read the clips from the book that he was reading? Like it's Inner Excellence, I think is the name of the book, and it's a very self-help book. And they showed he reads it every game, and he has passages outlined and underlined and highlighted. It does sound
he probably had to remind himself I can't be mad at my quarterback. I can't be mad at my quarterback.
That is exactly
what
he was doing.
It's not a good book, but it is interesting that he does that every game, and they just got footage of it this week.
There is an aspect to this game that I do want to talk about, but I'm going to utilize that when we are dissecting the divisional games. All right, let's move to what will be Robb's least favorite part of the show. Sunday night, probably the best game of the weekend. Bucs hosting Washington. And this game easily could have gone either way. You got to give Washington a little bit of credit, Jaden Daniels credit. He made all the plays that he had to make. And
no mistakes.
Washington also literally never punted. They moved the ball at least 40 yards every single time they had the ball. And they had 2 turnovers on downs in the red zone, and then every other time they scored. So they did their part, and nevertheless, you could argue the Bucs should have won the game, despite only having, I think it was 276 yards of offense. But man, that fumble late in the game, that's such a game changer because the Bucs defense had got one of those 4th down stops in the red zone, and you have all the momentum, and they were up 17-13 at that point. If you can go and put a drive together, maybe you go up 2 scores. Instead, first play of the drive, you give it right back to them at the 10-yard line, and then they score on third. That was a tough one, man. I was sorry to see it for you. I was thinking about you, Robb. That's definitely a tough pill to swallow. But the Bucs had some issues this year. We knew that, and especially with that defense and the secondary. So there's a good chance they weren't going to make a deep run. So maybe you can take some solace in that. But I'm curious, what were your takeaways from the game, Robb?
Yeah, I mean, look, man, they dominated the time of possession by 11 minutes. Our defense couldn't get off the field. There was nothing that we could do. The reason they kept going for it on 4th and 3rd downs because they kept converting. I know that they had the 2 turnovers on downs, but they had multiple they went for it on 4th down 5 times. Like there's zero respect for Todd Bowles' defense, and for good reason. It's one of the worst in football, and I know the numbers say that it has I know the numbers say that they're good on the run, which is relatively true, and then only like middle of the pack bad on passing. But you can just watch this defense, and more than anything, the reason why I fundamentally can't stand it is because if you're in any close game at the end, by fundamental philosophy, his defense is bend, don't break. And you saw that happen a little bit against Washington, even though they were just absolutely owning the time of possession. But here's the thing. When you're at the end of a game situation and a team just needs a field goal or it's close like that, bend but don't break is the worst thing you could have because you're giving up.
It would be better to break.
And you're training your guys all the time to allow these short things, and then at the end you want to tell them no, tighten up, like in a philosophy that they haven't been playing with all game or all year. So I just can't stand it because we've been in all these close games and we lose every single time. It feels like the defense never gets a stop because that's not how it's built. So it's just and it's not, to be fair, it's not all on Todd Bowles, this loss. I had problems with Liam Cohen's conservatism because he's never been conservative all year long. And in the first half, it seemed like he was very conservative. Now, I had this weird notion that I think he thought that we'd be able to just kind of vanilla run all over the Commanders in the first half, and then he would open it up in the second half. And it seemed like that's what he did. But the problem is that because our defense couldn't get off the field, the margin of error for our offense was so small that even that one punt we had in the first half was deadly to us, that we had like a 3-and-out that was deadly. And, you pointed out the fumble that led to a touchdown. And yes, of course, that was a backbreaker, but really we could have still won the game later in that game because as we're driving, we have a 3rd-and-1 and our rookie center who has been good and then has these kind of boneheaded plays. I'm going to give him grace because he's a rookie, but he just mistimed the snap, and it's on him because nobody else moved. And the whole D-line came through, and a 3rd-and-1 turned into a 4th-and-4. And we went ahead and kicked it, and because Bowles is always going to be conservative and stuff. And obviously you got to take the points. We're down 3, but that would have changed everything because then on that drive, then they would have had to score a touchdown. And I'm not going to say that we would have stopped them, but we had already stopped them multiple times in the red zone. So it would have been, I don't want to keep going on about it. It was a tough game to watch because, despite the stats not being in our favor, it did feel like the game was in our reach to win throughout the fourth quarter. So
yeah, it certainly was.
Just got to move on. I want to give credit to Jaden Daniels. I mean, it was a good defense to go against for your first playoff game. But he didn't make any mistakes, really. And I got to tell you, man, he has that Lamar thing where as he's kind of working through his progressions, he's out of the pocket and defenders are chasing him. He doesn't even look like he's really running or in a hurry or anything, but he just kind of just outruns these edge guys, these athletes, as he kind of meanders through, and he'll end up getting like 4, 5, 6, 7 yards as he kind of decides to tuck and run. So he does have that. He's just got to watch out about these hits he takes because he took a nasty pop from Zion McCollum, and he's had a history of that, going back to college. Well,
one thing that he appears to have that Lamar still hasn't proven to have is the clutch gene. He showed it all year in his rookie season. How many fourth quarter comebacks and touchdowns, late touchdowns did he have to win games this year? And then in the postseason, he's had one postseason game, like you said, didn't make a single mistake on the road. So kudos to him. And it'll be interesting to see what they do this weekend. We're going to dive into that game at Detroit in just a little bit, but that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Vegas has that 55.5.
At the very least, clutch or not, I know Drew's going to take issue with that, but I think the way I would put it is he showed up and was the same guy in his first game. In his first playoff game, he was the same guy that we saw all season. And I think an early Lamar wasn't that. So, he does have a leg up on that as well. I don't know about I've seen Lamar make some clutch plays. He had that 4th down in the last playoff game that he made a touchdown on to end the half and stuff. But I will say, Jaden Daniels, his first game, he was the same guy that he was all season long. So that's something you want to see for sure.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Yeah, that's fair. All right, last game of the weekend on Monday night, the Rams, their home game had to be moved to Arizona, which props to Arizona, the Cardinals organization, sending out multiple planes to go get the team. And I think it was up to 200 family members that they flew out.
400 people, dude.
Or 400.
They
400
flew
people.
400 people. Yeah.
It was pretty awesome to see that level of generosity from, a division rival owner. We've seen like teams like Detroit opened up their stadium when Buffalo got snowed in a couple years ago, but they're not division rivals. They don't play each other. So it was nice to see Arizona take that approach. And we've seen it before where a tragedy can galvanize a team and they're sort of playing for a city. And goddamn, did that Rams team, they came out with their hair on fire, especially on defense. 9 sacks of Sam Darnold in this game. And, I talked about it last week. In that loss to the Lions in Week 18, it was the first time all season we saw Darnold consistently under pressure, and he had happy feet, wasn't sure what to do with the ball, missed some open throws. In this one, he didn't really have many open throws. He didn't have much time because he was getting rocked all game long. And then when he did, a couple massive mistakes, the fumble return for a touchdown, another interception on a throw he should never have made. It was in the Rams, it was never a game. And kudos to them. All three of us liked the Rams in that game. So kudos to all of us. We were all on that. But you got to think, how much money did Sam Darnold, Rob, you actually texted it during the game. Darnold is literally burning money right now. He's, now a free agent. And if he loses that game but plays really well in a tight game and he throws for 275 and 2 scores and a pick, like, he might still command some serious dollars out there. You got to wonder, did a couple potential suitors say, maybe that was more of a O'Connell thing,
Yeah, I mean, if he had made a playoff push, we're talking about, because of the quarterback market, we're talking about $50 million per year around that, and that's not like breaking the bank. That's just what like any top 12 QB contract is going to be like. So we're talking about probably a 4-year, $200 million contract that he was set up for if he had won a playoff game or two and looked good doing it. And instead, he's probably going to go, and on top of that, on the Vikings, by the way, where he's had the support that he needs from Kevin O'Connell and stuff. But now we're talking about they're going to ship him off most likely. He's going to end up at some more dysfunctional franchise, and they're probably going to give him like 3 years, $110, $115 million. Yep. So, I mean, that's almost $100 million burned off just in 2 weeks, in 8 days. In 8 days.
And Drew, I'm curious, does he turn back into the pumpkin we saw the first handful of his years if he lands with the Tennessee Titans or something?
I mean, probably, but and I mean, I've been saying all year I didn't believe in the Sam Darnold renaissance. I thought,
it's funny how Rob is jumping off that train so quickly now.
I think the Vikings had one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. Although the only teams in the NFL they lost to this year were the Lions and the Rams.
I mean, to be fair though, I don't want to say that you were right because you kept being wrong. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I was going to say, so here's the but. I had a but there.
Yeah.
The but is, I have never before seen a game where a quarterback gets sacked 9 times and gets blamed for all of the sacks and his career.
Yeah, it was
ruined.
Almost all his fault. He had 4.5 seconds on 6 of those sacks.
That line was blocking nobody, which did not help. But Sean McVay was like, fuck it, send the house, and we'll see if he can throw with guys in his face. But like, I've seen quarterbacks throw, like Brett Favre throw 7 interceptions, or Herbert hurt his reputation this week by throwing 4 interceptions. I've never seen that with sacks before. I can't remember one quarterback where it was like, oh, wow, he just kept taking a beating. He's awful. But
to Rob's point, though, 4 or 5 of those sacks, he had 4.5 seconds. Like, there were numerous times where like he has to get rid of that ball, and he kept holding it.
I'm not saying it's not justified. I'm just saying this is the first time I can remember that happening.
Yeah, I've never seen more sacks that unequivocally, objectively were directly on the QB than this one.
Like, it felt like the whole stadium was yelling, throw it, and it wasn't
throw it away. Yeah, he was just like holding it and kind of bouncing around and stuff. I'm surprised he didn't just fucking run at some point.
To me, it was all up here, right? And he's getting happy feet. He didn't know what to do. And that's where, yeah, he's seeing ghosts. Exactly. And
we knew he wouldn't be in Minnesota next year. They've got JJ on a rookie deal. That was, this was always a 1-year audition. But yeah, his last 2 weeks.
No, he was going to be back with the Vikings. He was.
No way. There was no way. Not if he wanted to make money. While they have a quarterback on a rookie contract who just sat out a year, there's no way they were going to pay him money.
That they used a top 10 pick on. Yeah, I mean, they're really going to go and spend all that money. Yeah.
Yeah, and to talk about that matchup, man, I mean, it really just came down to the D-line to the O-line, because I'll save some of this stuff when we talk about the Rams' next opponent and next game and stuff, but really that is a success because, the secondary of the Rams is actually not really that good. So, I mean, they had all that pressure, and that's really what allowed them to just break the game open. And then on top of that, Brian Flores, in my opinion, is like a little bit better version of Todd Bowles. They have the same philosophy. They have these exotic blitzes. It's a lot of zone defense. They want to get pressure with their line and a little bit of a bend, don't break. And the one thing about zone is that McVay is going to absolutely destroy defenses that rely on a lot of zone because a lot of his offense is run through zone beaters.
Well, but also I was shocked at the defensive philosophy from Brian Flores. They played once this year. And as we talked about last week, Minnesota blitzed the most in the NFL. But surprisingly, they blitzed among the least on third down, but blitzed by far the most on first and second down. They employed that strategy in the first game against the Rams, and the Rams ate him alive because, Matthew Stafford has been eating the blitz alive for 15 years, like we talked about. And so what did they do in this game? The same exact thing. They were blitzing on first and second down.
I
seemingly
thought
all night
Brian
long.
Flores got a little exposed in this game. The whole Viking staff got outcoached. I mean, this is one of the biggest defensive beatdowns I've ever seen, where it got to be comedic. Where just like every time they snapped, and it's like they're gonna sack him again. And Sam Darnold looked like he got concussed after like sack 4 or 5 and didn't even know which way was up anymore, as he's just running into people back there. But I thought the Rams made a statement, and like that coaching staff still might be the best coaching staff in the league, especially if they can eke out 1 or 2 more wins in the playoffs here.
Yeah, certainly. All right, well, before we look ahead to the divisional round of the playoffs, the season is done, and we have all of the NFL awards set to be announced in about a week and a half or so before we get to the Super Bowl. And, there's obviously a couple that are worth discussing and detailing and maybe throwing some money on as well that I'd like to discuss briefly. And first off, the madness that has become the NFL MVP. So when we entered Week 18, the final week of the regular season, Josh Allen was a massive favorite to win the NFL MVP. He was going off at minus 900 in most sports books. And Lamar was the only guy anywhere within the stratosphere at like plus 350, plus 400. And then week 18 happens. Josh Allen plays 1 snap to keep his start streak alive and, gets pulled. They lose to the Patriots. Meanwhile, Lamar goes out. They need to win, so he balls out again. And then he is named the NFL All-Pro First Team quarterback. And when that news first broke, he became the actual favorite in most sports books. Not all of them actually jumped, but a large majority of them jumped and made Lamar the favorite. And that's because, who was it? Rob, I forget. You touched on who it was. There's only one
Steve
quarterback.
McNair is the only QB in the modern era, from what you can call it, since 2000 about to not win first team All-Pro, but win the MVP.
Oh, I thought the stat was first.
You thought
first
he was
player.
MVP, or you thought he was
Not MVP,
All-Pro,
but he was
won
first
MVP.
team All-Pro.
No,
Yeah,
he didn't
was
win the
MVP.
He didn't win the All-Pro at the position, but he won MVP. So he would be the potential Josh Allen would be the potential Steve McNair in this situation.
Was that a shared MVP? Was that the year it was LT and him, or was it?
Maybe I could. I don't remember that offhand. That was too many
His was
seasons ago.
2003.
Either way,
Well, yeah,
like
that was the height
narrative
of
popped up
LT's
with
tenure.
that narrative popped up was when Lamar Jackson won the first team All-Pro. Then the odds switched, but as soon as the odds started switching as well, that narrative about Steve McNair popped up. So I mean, and we talked about this, guys. MVP is a narrative-driven award, right?
He shared it with Peyton.
Oh, Peyton. So the MVP is a narrative-driven award, and that's what makes it a little different than the All-Pro, because usually the All-Pro is a lot more stats and production. It's kind of like who just had the better production year, and that's what's so interesting about this award. And, Lamar and Josh, that's kind of even beyond MVP or accolades. It's kind of been this kind of annoying narrative for a long time. There's a lot of other.
Well, is it me, or is it an insane head scratcher that Lamar gets named first team All-Pro quarterback? The odds switch to him being the favorite because, as you said, only one quarterback has ever won MVP without being first team All-Pro. So they make him the favorite because he won that award. And then within the matter of a couple days, the odds have gone back to Josh Allen being a pretty heavy favorite at -300, -350 in most places, and Lamar being around 2 plus 250. So, given that statistic, is it me, or is there not plenty of value on betting on Lamar Jackson? If you're getting 2.5 to 1 on your money, and for you to lose your money, you have to be breaking that precedent that's been set and only happened once, right? Since they have been.
Well, what's odd to me is that the votes have already been cast, so the odds shouldn't even be changing. What's interesting to me is because this is such a narrative-driven award, I wonder if people are being swayed by this last playoff game with the Ravens, where they show that they're able to just turn around and hand the ball off to Derrick Henry and win, which is showing the value that another player on that team is bringing. I wonder if it's just because this is one of those things where it's so
James Cook had a $120 and a score
driven.
himself. He wasn't a schlub this weekend.
Yeah, Derrick Henry had more rushing yards than Lamar had passing yards, though, and as many touchdowns. So
Lamar
and this has always been my
yards passing than Josh Allen, and more rushing yards and more touchdowns.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't.
Yeah,
Lamar. No, Josh Allen had way more pass yards than Lamar. You're crazy. Josh Allen had over 200 yards.
Yeah, I would have thought. I watched that game. I'd be very surprised.
You're crazy.
I'm sorry. I was talking about on the season. I didn't know you were talking about in the game.
Oh no! I'm just talking about. I was just speculating. I wonder if that game was affecting these odds, even though the votes have already been cast, so it shouldn't matter. But
because anytime the line is moved, it's the public, the money, whether it's the sharps in Vegas or the masses. And if a lot of money floods in on one side, Vegas has to adjust to try to balance it. The goal is always to get the same amount of bets on equal side so they can collect their 10% in the middle. And then it doesn't matter who wins. But personally, I think there's a little bit of value on Lamar, knowing that precedent, knowing he's going off right now at plus 250. But it'll be really interesting to see how that whole thing shakes out. There's another player award that, I think could go either way. And that's the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. So TJ Watt is the favorite and has been for most of the second half of the season. He's -130 or so in most sports books as the favorite. And there's really only one other guy that's within reach, and that's Pat Surtain, the DB from Denver, going off at about +150. Myles Garrett is +950 in third. So I think we can pretty much rule Myles Garrett out. This is probably a two-player award. So, Drew, I'm curious, who do you think should win, and is that the same person that you think will win?
That's hard to say. I don't know. I'd probably say Surtain should win. I think Watt will probably win. It's hard because I feel skewed by the playoffs. But Pittsburgh's slide at the end of the year was directly related to Watt being injured. And so I'd probably go Surtain.
Yeah, and Surtain missed some games, and that's always going to hurt. And, Watt played through injury, and you saw the value he brought of healthy Watt versus a little injured Watt. So, and, unfortunately with these awards, as much as they're a vacuum of a year, there is a little bit of legacy buildup where TJ Watt's kind of been on the bubbling of these awards, and whether you want to call them snubs or not, whether Myles Garrett, outperformed him and deservedly so, got these, he's been a candidate for this award over and over and over again. And even though we like to say that it's just about a year-to-year award, that does play a role in these sometimes when it's close.
Absolutely.
It does, because it's a little bit like, well, he deserves one over the course of a career, So I mean, it's, so it's a little bit like that. I love Surtain. I wish that he was on my team. Good Lord, but I think this one's gonna go to Watt for sure.
I agree, and I think minus 130 actually isn't a bad price to pay. Like, I'll pay $130 to win $100 when I feel as confident as I feel that he's going to win the award. In primarily for the reason you talked about. Like, there's been a few seasons now where he was right there, easily could have won the award and didn't. And yes, Surtain is having a really good year. Surtain is younger. He's going to have plenty more great years, and he's very likely to win this award at some point. But also, DBs don't tend to win this award as often as pass rushers. So taking that into account, 11.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles. That's a lot of forced fumbles for any one guy in one season. So the stats also say he had an exceptional year. So like I said, I think minus 130, that's not a bad price to pay for a guy that I feel pretty darn confident is going to win that award. All right, so I mean, really the other 5 awards that remain, NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, NFL Comeback Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, all these awards, NFL Offensive Player of the Year, there are clear, massive favorites. Saquon is minus 5,000. So you're going to bet $5,000. Excuse me, you're going to bet $500 to win $100. And that's just
you'll win $100.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I think I'm doing that wrong. Whenever I have a flip-flop it, it shouldn't be, it's 10 to 1. It's 50 to 1. No, yeah. You're laying 50 to 1. No. You're laying 50 to 1 at minus 5,000. So it's not bet 500 to win 100. It's bet 5,000 to win 100.
To win 100. Yeah.
Yes. So it's like,
Yikes.
You're not going to do that. So he's going to win that award. Derrick Henry's plus 2,000. That with that big of a disparity, that award is over. NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, Jaden Daniels, minus 1,000, massive favorite. Brock Bowers had a great year. He's plus 3,000. Too big of a disparity. Clearly, Jaden Daniels is going to win that award. Defensive Rookie of the Year, which was close a few weeks ago. Jared Verse has taken a massive leap. He's minus 1,000. Quinyon Mitchell is next at plus 700. Maybe you could argue that one's not a complete lock, but I think Jared Verse showed throughout the season the difference that he made for that Rams defense. Joe Burrow's minus 4,000 as Comeback Player of the Year. Kevin O'Connell minus 1,000 as Coach of the Year. Dan Campbell plus 575, which that one did surprise me based off of week 18.
I was about to say the disparity in odds for that really actually surprised me because I've said it multiple weeks throughout the throughout the season that Kevin O'Connell is my Coach of the Year. But man, I really thought that Dan Campbell made a surge here, especially when they beat the Vikings and beat them out.
And they lost all their players, and they kept finding ways to win.
I know,
right?
Yeah, I really thought he made a surge here. But you know what's funny is, this is all the votes have been cast, so it shouldn't matter. But
right.
I feel like the Sam Darnold absolute collapse in the playoffs will just push Kevin O'Connell even further because they're just going to be like, how the hell did you win 14 games with this guy, even though Sam didn't play that badly all year long?
Yeah, but all the votes were in like a week and a half ago.
I know, but we're talking about odds, and I just think that they are affected by after the votes and stuff.
Well, and that's why at plus 575, you could probably say there's value in betting on Dan Campbell.
100%. That's the one. That's the one of
still
these
win
that we
award.
talked
of
about.
The 5. That's the only one I don't feel is a slam dunk. But
especially
as
as
we said, you're not going to
Kevin O'Connell the last week of the season.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
I was surprised about that
coming out of that in the way they won. But another thing that I would say is, laying minus 5,000 to bet on Saquon to win Offensive Player of the Year and Jaden Daniels Offensive Rookie, all that. We've said there's no value. You're not going to bet that much money to win $100, and that's why the odds are skewed the way they are. But that's another spot where if you parlay those, not every sports book allows you to do that. But if you put the Offensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, and Joe Burrow, who's the clear winner of the NFL Comeback Player of the Year, you put those 4 together, and you're getting about even money. And it's like, all 4 of those things are basically locks. And like, yeah, individually, it's not worth making the bet, but I feel exceptionally confident that all 4 things are almost a certainty to happen. So it's like, knowing that, and again, not every sportsbook will allow you to do that. Only certain ones do, so you might have to shop around. But if you find the ones that do, that's a bet that is well worth making. All right, guys, I want to look ahead now, move on to the NFL Divisional Weekend, which it is long since, for 30 years now, been my favorite weekend of the year, at least in terms of NFL football. Wild Card Weekend is always kind of a little, sometimes you get some great games, sometimes you get some clunkers. Championship Sunday, I love the name. It's Championship Sunday, but all it takes is one blowout, and you only got one good game. And then I feel like half the time we get 2 blowouts sometimes. Whereas divisional playoffs, that's where you're getting, we separated the men from the boys, and now it's only really good football teams left. And so it should make for some great, great football. So we'll kick it off. First game of the weekend, Saturday afternoon. The Houston Texans riding a lot of momentum, and a quarterback that tends to play well so far in big spots. And he played well again last week, and C.J. Stroud going on the road to face the Kansas City Chiefs. The line opened at 7.5. It's already ballooned to 8.5. So I'm curious, Rob, do you give Texans a shot to win, or do you like them to at least cover the number?
No, and I'm laying the points.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Yeah, the Chiefs defense is still good. They've had a rest. They had an extra week to work Hollywood Brown back in. They were able to move last time we saw them, they were able to move Xavier Worthy back to a natural position, more inside. He's going to be taking over the Rashee Rice role and use his speed for yards after catch ability. These guys, Andy Reid, he's ready. Texans, they have a good defensive line, not so good on the back end. They got Nico Collins, that's great, but Chiefs are just the better overall team. They have Patrick Mahomes on rest with Andy Reid, and this is not really a team that's been blowing teams out, but I really do think the Hollywood Brown just moving pieces back, not just because Hollywood is so good individually, but what it opens up for their offense. I think we're about to see a little bit of a shellacking in this game.
Interesting. All right, Drew, how about you?
Well, we've talked at length about how the Chiefs are winning every game by one possession here. Really makes me want to take the Texans to cover, but I think I'm with Rob. This team hasn't played a meaningful game in like 29 days or something. They have been in the playoff lab, resting up, getting Hollywood Brown, like you said, worked in. This fully rested team. I think that also the Texans have never won a playoff game on the road in their franchise's history. I think they've lost like 6 straight to the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are going to come out, put it on them early, and get out. So I'm going to take the Chiefs to cover.
It's tough because, as you guys talked about, the Chiefs haven't covered many spreads all year long. They've been, I think, the worst team in the league at covering
for multiple years.
And you can make the argument that the fact that they've gone almost a month without starters playing live game action will have an absolute impact on this game. And if you remember the game from a few weeks ago when Houston played in Kansas City, and up until Tank Dell tore his everything, and C.J. Stroud, his best friend, was like crying and trying to leave the building in the ambulance with him. Like, until that happened, they were in that game, and they were moving the ball on that Chiefs defense.
Put them in the game, yeah.
Like, they were in that game and were even after for a little bit, but it obviously became a little bit too much to overcome as the game progressed. And we've seen it many, many times, especially during the Peyton Manning era, which, Peyton Manning, top 5 all quarterback all time. I don't think that's even debatable. And yet he has the most losses at home off a bye in NFL history. And what did they do? They almost always rested all their starters in week 18. And therefore, then they didn't play week 18. What was week 17 then? They have their bye week. And then you go into that divisional round game having not played in almost a month with your starters, and you come out flat. We saw it so many times, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Houston either leading at halftime or 100% in this game for much of it. I love Texans' first half line last I saw was 4.5.
I like that.
I
like
love
that a
Texas
lot.
plus 4.5 first half. But I agree with you, Rob. I think Hollywood Brown allowing their offense to shift things back, and we haven't seen the playoff Travis Kelce yet, and that's because we weren't in the playoffs, and now we are. So as the game progresses, I think they eventually kind of wear them down, and I'm with you guys. I think they cover, but it's like a front door cover. Like they're not covering all game, and then in the fourth quarter they score to go up 10-13, and they hold on from there.
Well, and to your point, Kendall, though, all those Peyton Manning teams were offense-first teams. All those teams that would come out and they weren't quite hitting the timing right on certain routes. As much as Patrick Mahomes is amazing, the Chiefs are a defense-first team. And I think the rest helps more when you're a defense-first team. So I think that defense is going to be raring to go. And the Texans emotionally having to go back to where they saw this guy break his leg the last time.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
And the Chiefs are healthier. Shaq Mason got ruled out, so the starting right guard, who's, been a very, very good offensive lineman in the NFL for many years, is out for Houston. So that's not helpful.
I mean, the Chiefs' D-line is going to dominate the Texans' O-line. I mean, they're not going to be able to run on them, and there's going to be pressure in C.J. Stroud. Chris Jones and their guy Karlaftis is going to be constantly in his face, in his lap all the time. And I just want to shout out, I want to shout out Brett Veach, the GM, as well as Andy Reid, obviously, because the transition that this Chiefs team made from offensive first to defensive first 2 years ago is one of the most without missing a beat and still winning Super Bowls, is the reason why they're up for a three-peat and why Kendall and I put money on top of having Mahomes. But that transition that they made seamlessly to be a defensive-led team and win in the playoffs that way is just phenomenal. And they did it while dumping off their cornerback, L'Jarius Sneed, that we all thought was like a shutdown corner and vital to that defense. And they just said, well, we don't want to pay you and we're still going to be good. So, I just want to give them a shout out because it's one of the most impressive feats that I've seen in modern football.
Where can we find the over-under on bad calls in the Chiefs' favor in this game?
Okay, that's a good point to move forward now. So let's stay in the AFC. Sunday, the last game of the weekend, which this game might be the best game of the season potentially. The Baltimore Ravens going on the road. They're actually favored by 1.5 at Buffalo. The line opened Buffalo minus 1.5, and within 3 hours, it was already starting to shift, and now it's gone a complete 3 points to the point that Baltimore is favored by 1.5 in Buffalo. We saw this matchup earlier this season back in week 4. You guys both liked Buffalo in that matchup, or at least against the spread. I said Baltimore's going to win this game 40-7, and they won 35-10. I felt exceptionally confident in that game. This will not be that game. This Buffalo is going to be in this game, but for me personally, it's just a bad matchup, plain and simple, for the Buffalo Bills. What does Buffalo do now? They've transformed their offense to be a run-first, check-down offense. And against that stout Baltimore front, I don't know how successful James Cook is going to be running the football, putting them in a lot of third and longs. And that secondary for Baltimore has really come on. So I don't think we're going to see an explosive game from Buffalo offensively. And conversely, the weakness of the Bills defense, we've seen it all year, is their rush defense. And Derrick Henry still looks like Derrick Henry from every year we've seen him in his career. So as much as I'm rooting for Buffalo, I hope they win this game. I just think it's a bad matchup. And so I'm going to lay the 1.5. I'm going to take the Ravens. Drew, how about you?
Yeah, I'm taking the Ravens too. I think, like you said, this is going to be the best game of the year so far until the winner has to go play the Chiefs, and then that'll take over. But I can't wait to watch it. I do think it's going to be back and forth, but like you said, I think the Ravens just have more weapons, more pieces, and I think it's a bad matchup for the Bills. So I'm going to take the Ravens to cover.
How about you, Rob?
Yeah, the Ravens have more pieces, and it's not even close. It's 9 Pro Bowlers, 2 Hall of Famers, and Josh Allen is the only QB in history to be an All-Pro QB with no All-Pros on the team besides him. So, I mean, it's not even close who the better team is, and the reason why the Ravens are are favorites on the road in Buffalo is because Vegas knows that they have the better team overall. And yes, the matchup is bad for the Bills if you want to break down units, but really it's just fundamentally 2 versus 1. And by that, I mean, there are 2 avenues to by the way the Ravens can win. And one of those is Lamar taking over, and the other one is Derrick Henry, Hall of Fame, top 8 running back of all time, taking over. The Bills only have one avenue, and that's Josh Allen being the best player on the football field and taking over that game. I don't really like those odds. That's half the odds of the Ravens. So for me, it's pretty easy if I'm putting money on it. That the Ravens just have the better overall team. There's not the Bills. It's maybe the better O-line, but besides that, I'm not sure.
The better O-line. I think the question of who has the better team isn't definite. I think the Bills have a great team, but I do think it's a bad matchup, Ravens versus Bills.
But one thing I will say, you guys talked about all the talent being on Baltimore's side. So Zay Flowers didn't practice again today. Not looking great for him suiting up. So they're starting Jimmy, Johnny, and Ricky from down the street at wide receiver against a secondary that has been flat out elite for 2 months. No one is moving the ball in the air against Buffalo. No one. The Lions, I guess the Lions did move the ball.
2 months?
They moved against everyone.
No, Kendall, they were in like shootouts that had 40 points. They definitely were not elite for 2 months.
The two games, the Lions and the Rams, right? They got ripped. They got ripped in those 2 games. But
they gave up
the last handful of games.
That's not great either.
Well, yeah, but they had backups in the game. They benched their entire team.
No, I mean the first time.
In this, all I'm saying is,
but also, what's the Bills' defensive soft spot?
Courtland
is their
Sutton
run defense.
will be better than every receiver that plays for Baltimore this week, right?
Or for Buffalo.
Well, yeah, but Josh Allen just spreads it to anybody, right? That's not what we're talking about. I'm just saying, to say Baltimore has, all the talent, they don't have a single receiver that could catch a sneeze. If you can catch sneezes, you know what I'm saying? There
Mark
is a
Andrews
hole.
Can, I
and
guess,
let's not forget, Lamar Jackson, you and I, Rob, we've talked about it a lot and argued with Drew about it. He doesn't have the greatest track record in postseason. He has some great postseason performances. He also has some terrible ones, including to the Buffalo Bills when they scored 3 points a couple years ago. When he lost in Buffalo and was embarrassed.
What's crazy is that you could argue last week was Lamar's best playoff performance, which is a wild thing to say when Derrick Henry outshined him. So I mean, but I mean, this is what we came
I
to
don't think
expect.
it's a slam dunk. I think the Bills are absolutely going to be in this game in the fourth quarter and probably have the ball down 3 or 4 in a chance to win. I just don't think they're going to.
Yeah, I'm just talking about odds. I mean, because look, it's absolutely possible that Josh Allen shows up and becomes the best player on that field. That's possible. But I mean, it's just the Ravens have twice the avenue to victory here, and it doesn't have to be their quarterback, and it doesn't have to be their running back. It could be one of them. So I mean, it's just, James, you're not going to be able to, the Bills aren't going to be able to at any point just say, what's coming and we know what's coming, and we're going to turn around and hand the ball off to James Cook. But the Ravens can, because the Bills' run defense is the weakness of the defense. So I mean, it's all Lamar really has to do is get a lead, and then for 3 quarters can quite literally, even though they know it's coming, turn around and hand the ball off. So I mean, it's a tough situation for the Bills, and I'm excited to see it because if the Bills end up winning, that tells me it's going to be a crazy game, and that's something that I want to see.
Yeah, and I think we all kind of want to see Bills Chiefs in an AFC Championship. I mean,
100%, because
a Ravens rematch would be fun. But that Bills Chiefs divisional game from a couple years ago, was that not the most entertaining football game you've ever seen in your life?
Best playoff game ever.
Entertaining doesn't mean I want to see it play again. I want the Ravens to pull. I want to see Ravens Chiefs here.
All right, guys, let's move over to the NFC. We've agreed so far on the first couple games. Maybe we'll have a disagreement here. We got Washington going on the road to face the Detroit Lions, who are coming off the bye. Lions favored by 9.5. Similar to the Chiefs one, it's already gone up a point. It opened minus 8.5. It's gone up another point. Do you think the Lions do enough to cover and win by double digits? Rob, what do you say?
Yep, laying the points for the Lions. Commanders' storybook ending happens here. The Lions, they're set up a little bit more extremes than the Bucs, where the offense is a little bit better. The defense was supposedly a little bit worse, although I think that the defense is going to have a little more teeth than the Bucs showed. And the offense, the Commanders' defense, I know that because the Bucs didn't have the ball very often, it looked like the Commanders' defense did a good job, but they really didn't. We drove down in chunks at will, and you saw what happened when we were grooving at the end of the first half. The Bucs, so they just drove down at will and immediately scored a touchdown. And I think the Lions on rest, they've been banged up. They hadn't had a bye week since like week 5, so they really needed that bye week. They're gonna come ready to play, and it's not that I think I think Jane Jones is going to show up because they can score on this defense, but I don't think they're going to do enough. I think the Commanders' defense is going to be the weakness here, and the Lions will win by 10 points.
This is a tough one. I do think the Lions are going to win, and I think the Lions are going to score. I just don't know if they're going to be able to shut down Washington enough. I'm going to take Washington to cover on a backdoor cover, but the Lions have scored 30 or more in their last 5 games of the regular season. This team is like you said, Rob, we watched the Bucs have success. If it weren't for 2 fumbles, really, that you guys could have scored 30, 40 points in that game. So I do think the Commanders could have success against Detroit's defense. I think fun game for Jaden Daniels, but yeah, I'll take him to cover, but probably lose by 8.
I think a backdoor cover is certainly in play. Little talked about, and a lot of people didn't realize Austin Eckler was coming back last week.
What? That drove me insane.
I wasn't aware.
I didn't even know he was coming back.
And he is a big part of their offense.
Yes.
Brian Robinson Jr. can catch passes, but he's not going to make guys miss out in the flat. Eckler was still doing that early in the season until he suffered his 38th concussion of his career. And he's back. They will move the ball against this Lions defense, but off the rest, and let's not forget, so Washington's rush defense is really, really porous. And what does Detroit want to do first? I mean, everybody thinks
right
of
past
Goff and these receivers
is
run
Monty's
the ball
coming
down
back
their goddamn
apparently
throat.
somehow.
And even without David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs has proven he can be an alpha. Give me the ball 75% of the rushing plays, and I can easily handle that. So, Detroit
Montgomery's
is going
back.
to continue to score. Yeah. Did they actually announce he's playing in this game?
I believe so. I don't think there's an official announcement, but they're pushing for him to play for sure. Which is crazy.
Back.
He had to go to like 5 different doctors.
Back.
Okay, but
he had to go to like
he's
5
not
different
play his
doctors to get approval
load.
to come back.
It would be silly to give him his normal snap percentage, which was higher than Jahmyr Gibbs's.
Yeah, but if you hit him 3 times with Gibbs and then bring in Montgomery on a quick, that's what's been lethal for him all year. But they have carried on without him. But now he's back. So
yeah, I mean, at the end of the so Vegas has this over under at 55.5. It's been a while since I saw a line that high. So obviously there's going to be a lot of fireworks. And I think Washington will move the ball, and they will also score. Jaden Daniels is going to score. I think he shows a little bit of being a rookie on the road in this particular environment. And I see like a 37-23 kind of game. Detroit's just
the Lions play a lot more. They play a lot more man defense than the Bucs do. Aaron Glenn likes to be aggressive with his man cover schemes. So I see the Lions doing what the Commanders kind of did to us, which is owning the time of possession. I think they're going to get a lead, and then they're going to just run the ball down their throats and just hold the ball and hold the ball and hold the ball. So for me, this is a matter of, do I think the Lions are going to score 30? Because I think the Commanders are going to score around 20. And I think the answer for me is yes. And I could see, just like you said, Kendall, backdoor, where at the end of the game, they're just running the ball, and Gibbs breaks a big one and just bust that cover wide open.
Bust the game open. All right, so final game of the weekend, guys. The Rams going on the road to face the Eagles. Opened at 5.5. Now it's either 6 or 6.5, depending upon the sports book you look at. I don't know about you guys, and I know a lot of people are going to like the Rams in this game after what they saw from Philadelphia last week. They look dysfunctional on offense. Honestly, Green Bay fumbled the opening snap, and so Philly starts the game on the 10-yard line. They score a touchdown 2 plays later, and then they drive down, kick a field goal. It was 10-0 5 minutes into the game. Philadelphia had 80 yards of offense the rest of the game practically. They looked atrocious on offense, but that defense was still fantastic once again. And I have to wonder, do the Rams come down to earth They had that galvanizing game amid the wildfires out here in Los Angeles, and now they're going to go and face a team that is so physical. And one of my closest friends is a diehard Rams fan. He watches every single snap of even preseason games, and he was dreading this matchup. He wanted no part of Philadelphia. He normally will only bet on a team if he bets. He's like close to betting on the Eagles himself, and that speaks volumes to me. So as crazy as it sounds, I'm actually going to take the Eagles, and I'm going to lay the 6.5. How about you, Drew?
Well, you make a lot of valid points. I'm going to take the Rams here, at least to cover. But I think I'm going to take them as my upset special. I think they're going to win this game. I think they're going to ride this emotion that they've had. You really look at what they've done since the bye week when everybody thought they were about to ship the teams off. They already beat the Bills. They beat the Cardinals. And then they won their first playoff game. Like, the Rams have been rolling. Their defense, which is stacked with rookies and sophomores, is stepping up and looking like mature enough to handle the load. And then your team is still helmed by Matthew Stafford, who's probably the most experienced vet that you would still want on your team in the NFL. I think the Eagles are going to need to score points one way or the other, and I don't think they can on this defense.
Yeah, so I was holding back on talking about the Rams when I thought of their defense when we were talking about the last week's matchup. But I'm with you, Kendall. I think I'm gonna take the points with the Rams to cover, but I am obviously taking the Eagles to win. The Rams, they are a defensive line for their defense, at least. They're a defensive line driven team. If they can't get pressure, their secondary will be exposed, and the Eagles have a top 3 O-line. So I see the teeth of that defense being negated by the offensive line unit. And the Eagles are just so multiple, and we're talking about the number 1 defense in football. So I like Matt Stafford and I like McVay, but this isn't. They're gonna be playing a lot of man zone, and they're gonna have Quignon and Cooper DeJean matched up on Cooper Kupp and Puka. And sure, I like Sean to move Puka around and kind of try to get him off of Quignon and get him off these guys. But at the same time, I just think the Eagles are just too big a machine. They have too many stars, too many studs, and their units across the board are generally better than the Rams. And I'm a unit-by-unit guy. So I don't really give much esteem to the emotional argument. I know, Drew, that's a big one for you that you've been talking about all week with the emotional advantage and stuff. But for me, despite like potential offensive malfunction with the Eagles, I think Saquon will be too much. I think A.J. Brown gets his targets again because I don't think the Rams secondary is that good. The D-line has been getting a lot of pressure lately, and it's been covering up a lot of the flaws. But behind that O-line, Jalen Hurts is going to have some time. So,
well, and Drew,
like I said, though, I have the Rams to cover because I do think that the Rams are a fighting team, and I'm going to love Matt Stafford and Sean McVay in any of these playoff games.
Well, Drew, you talked about like how good the Rams have been since their early bye, and they have. They've only had one game where they like looked bad and got embarrassed. That was against the Eagles when the Eagles flattened them as that game progressed. And
I mean, Saquon was just.
I guess there's two. They also didn't show up against Miami on that Monday night game.
Their defense
and that offense has like had moments, has stretches this season where the offense just doesn't do anything. Interestingly. And I'm curious to see how this is going to play out. This year in the NFL, the 2 teams that scored the least amount of points in the first quarter were the Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Rams. Both teams were notoriously extremely slow starters all year. And I think the Rams are going to need that to be the case. Because if Philly gets out ahead and that defense can pin their ears back at all, Stafford is looking at a very, very long afternoon on the road in the windy, cold of Philadelphia.
And by the way, the linebacker for the Eagles, Zach Bond, what a story for this guy. This guy is having an absolutely insane, bonkers year. If you go back, if you look at his numbers, they're right up on par with Luke Kuechly's DPOY year, which is just insane. And we're talking about a linebacker that's not sucking up tackles on a bad defense. We're talking about a linebacker that's doing all this on the number 1 defense in football. So it's crazy because he was not even part of their plans. He was like a depth player, and now he's absolutely balling out on this defense. So I just wanted to give him a quick shout-out because he's a great story in the NFL, and I don't think he's talked about at all.
Well, and like you said, Kendall, the Eagles, dominated that earlier game. I went back to watch it. I mean, the main two things the Rams are going to have to shore up is first, Saquon had like 250 yards or something that game, just destroyed them. And then second, Stafford got sacked 5 times. So that's what you're talking about. The Eagles can't pin their ears back. The Rams are going to have to find a way to keep the chains or keep ahead of the chains. But those would be the two things that I think they have to shore up. I guess the reason I'm going the Rams is I think the coaching difference. I think McVay, having seen what the Eagles want to do, can adjust. I like him more, so I'm taking the Rams.
By the way, I know I keep throwing out these stats or whatever. Nick Sirianni has like the highest winning percentage of
he does
of
I'm
any
not trying
coach
to hate on
in
Nick
like
Sirianni.
Well,
no.
It's wild because, like you
he's
said,
got like the highest winning percentage of the coaches
is.
in like NFL history. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yes, it's crazy. And what makes it crazier is that pretty much across the board, everyone agrees he's not a very good head coach, despite knowing his record is the greatest we've ever seen. And everyone agrees that he's not a very good coach.
Well, because the secret weapon for the Eagles is Howie Roseman. So, I mean,
They
we
have
all,
all
you
the
know,
best
and
players in the league.
Yes, they have the best roster in the NFL. When you have the best offensive or top 3 offensive line, top 3 defensive line, skill position players are elite. Like,
Howie's insane.
What?
Former Gator, by the way, University of Florida, former Gator, Howie. But he's insane, dude. If I'm an Eagles fan, I'm salivating at every draft season because what he does during the draft is just crazy. The fact that he set up his team, I mean, I know this is kind of off topic, but Quinyon and Cooper for the future. I mean, it's just crazy what he's doing constantly, and he's so aggressive, and it constantly works out. So that's what's so crazy.
All right, guys. Well, that'll wrap it up for the divisional chat. Before we go, just want to bounce to Kendall's Corner really quick. Last week, once again, we hit our moneyline parlay. This week, we're staying away from money lines, though. We're going to go back to teasing. It's time to tease. And instead of doing a standard 6-point teaser, because that Lions line has moved up to 9.5, you can't tease that down to 3.5. That's too dangerous, leaving the hook sitting there. So you pay a little extra juice. You do a 7-point teaser. You take the Chiefs at -1.5, Lions -2.5, Eagles +0.5 point. So they basically just need to win the game. Put those together, you get +120. So you give a little bit of juice instead of +140, but that extra point, it's always better to be on the front side of that hook than on the back side because so many games end by a field goal. So that's where I'm going this week. So if you want to make a little bit of money, just listen to Kendall's Corner. I've been printing money all year long. For Robb Hue and Drew James, it's time to go out and make some winning plays.